All right, welcome, insane children. This is crowd design session number 7 for Alice Asylum, which we are hosting on our Discord server, which is given to our patrons, and I think the $5 tier. And if you want to follow along, we are looking at the Asylum Wiki over on AmericanMcGee.com. There is a link to that in the description below. And if you would like to join a future session, do head over to our Patreon channel, link for that in the description below as well. Today we are discussing suggestions from the crowd, with the topic being gameplay. There are about 42 suggestions in the gameplay section, and we will try to get through a large chunk of those today. If you are in the chat on Discord with us today, then please do remember that you can use the microphone emoji to indicate when you have a microphone and something to say if you want to join in on the discussion. I believe that that's it for the start, unless our mods have anything else they want to add.
Just want to say hello.
Hello.
Say welcome back from the high seas, Captain.
Arg, matey.
Oh,
We had
boy.
a mighty fine time out there.
It has been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, there's enough of that. I went sailing quite a bit during the winter, and now the boat is out of the water and on the hard, and there will be no more sailing until October or November. So we've got plenty of time to get lots of work done. All right, well, let's...
Continue.
No, I was just going to say the next episode of Pirate Jam is going to be up very soon, isn't it?
Yes, I am in the process of uploading the second episode of Pirate Jam 2019 to YouTube as we are recording this. So if you're interested in that, you can find all of the Pirate Jam episodes on my YouTube channel, assuming that that's where you're watching this right now. All right, with that out of the way, let us jump into ideas and suggestions for gameplay in Alice Madness Returns. This is a list that is over on the wiki, link to the wiki in the description below. This is kind of a hodgepodge mix of a lot of different ideas that our community have come up with. Top of the list, number 1 is caterpillars' words are trapped in ice, and we free them to solve a puzzle. I think this must be inspired. There's an image that we did a while back that is it's called Frozen Caterpillar, and it is the caterpillar that everyone knows and loves, except he is trapped in ice. And it sounds to me like not only would we free the words to solve a puzzle, but that perhaps freeing the words is itself a puzzle. So I'm kind of curious what kind of thoughts we have on this.
So the words meaning like the letters?
Well, I'm posting the image into the chat so people can see what you're talking about.
Yep. And it does appear in the image as if he has bubbly something is coming out of his mouth. Now, I don't know. I mean, if you unfroze those, would it just be like, you know, of being frozen? Or would he be saying something like, the red key card is behind the gold pyramid? I mean, who knows, right?
I need the red key card for open the blue door. I mean, wait.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, I think there would be sort of like words floating in his bubbles that got released. Maybe while they're under the ice, they're just too blurry to make out. So you need to sort of like free the words and then solve the puzzle to get them into the right order, and then you know what to do. I think it could be a good mechanic there.
Yeah, I don't think it should be drown out too much, but having it as a one-off mechanic would be interesting to do.
Yeah, I could imagine actually that his words are the key to freeing him. Because, I mean, if you were in the process of being frozen into the ice, would you be recording a message related to some side mission? Or would you be like, damn it, I need a way to get out of here. I better record the secret, the unlock to how to get me out of here. So perhaps what happens is as Alice frees the series of words and bubbles, those lead her to the things necessary to get Caterpillar out of the ice. And then, of course, at that point, Caterpillar can be like, oh my God, thank you for getting me out of the ice. Now, by the way, go get the red key card over here. Yeah. All right.
I think.
No, go ahead.
I'm just looking at what chat's saying, and I think that is a good point of.
So Wendy Jaw asks in the chat, what role does the caterpillar play in the game? Well, if you look at the first two games, he was he was intentionally cast as a sort of neutral oracle. That is to say, he wasn't really on one side or another of the politics of Wonderland, though I think he was very much in favor of saving Wonderland. So I always had in my mind that Caterpillar was like the Cheshire Cat, an occupant, a neutral occupant of Wonderland, one of those sort of mysterious oracles who, Alice goes to seeking advice, and of course that's the role that he played in the original books. So I figure in this game it'll be the same. And if we're going to go along with the idea that he's frozen in ice, then we're probably going to want to come up with a reason for why the Oracle of Wonderland would be frozen in ice. So I think metaphorically that would obviously mean that for some reason he's holding information that Alice's subconscious doesn't want her to be aware of. And so it may be that she has to sacrifice something or she has to overcome something in order to melt that ice and to release whatever information it is about the situation that, prior to whatever sacrifice she makes, perhaps she's not prepared to hear.
Another thing I was thinking with ice is when you go to Dante's Inferno, the 7th level is actually frozen, where Lucifer is. And that's the level of betrayal. So maybe he was frozen because he betrayed one of the queens, something of that nature.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think that what is the message in being frozen in ice? So I like the idea that we look at the sort of connotation that ice has in the politics of Wonderland or in the psychology of Alice's mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that the night of the fire, for instance, Alice's home burns down and it is snowing outside. It's icy outside. We also have this idea that at the beginning of this new game of Alice Asylum, that there is a scene in which we see Alice and her sister working together to build a snowman. So could it be that the caterpillar is somehow linked up with that night with the sister and perhaps some instance of betrayal?
Do you want to build a snowman?
There's no musical theater going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it definitely the role of the caterpillar certainly needs pinning down before we know why he's in the ice and why he's got to get out. So, yeah.
Well, we've just pinned down the role. The role of the caterpillar is as sort of neutral. So he's going to be a sort of neutral arbiter of truth. He doesn't care about the politics of Wonderland. He doesn't necessarily care about whatever words that he's speaking doing some sort of harm to Alice, because he only speaks the truth. Again, he would be frozen in the ice because whatever it is he has to say to Alice is going to be of a nature that her subconscious doesn't want her to be aware of. So I think we pick up the thread from there, and we just need to come up with whatever secret it is that he would be holding on to that would then result in him being frozen in the ice. I think another point to make about him being frozen in the ice is in which domain do we have some area where you've got frozen elements. So anyway, I think it'd be good if we maybe put him into a page of his own. I think he's already got a page on the wiki. Yep.
Doesn't have much, but yeah, he's in there.
Do.
Well, we could outline some of the stuff that was just now said, and any of the points that we haven't got a particular answer for could be filled in with a question mark. But that's it. He's also the physical embodiment of the concept of transformation, which to every one of the games has been a very critical element, but to this game is a particularly critical element. So I think having him represent that, in the secret that he's holding on to, in the key that he holds to what Alice has to do next, all of that would be really, really good.
And with that transformation, though, too, could it be where you unleash him, or he's frozen and he finally becomes the butterfly, as in the final moment, or is that just moving too quickly?
No, I mean, I think didn't we have a scene in Madness Returns where he was cocooned and then he transforms?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I mean, we've done that once. It might not be that he's doing the transformation himself. He could just be the guide for the transformation that Alice needs to undergo. And because he's the sort of embodiment of transformation, this would be a really smart place to have the statement or the plaque or the sign or the book related to the concept of solve et coagula. That's the, first you must dissolve in order to reform. And of course, in this scene, we have an instance where we have to dissolve the ice in which he's contained in order for the story to continue. So this would be a good place to put that.
It fits really well.
Yeah, this could be a really beautiful, really interesting, kind of central point to her journey.
I'm looking at some of the different areas. I think denial might actually be the best from what I'm seeing, of just having it as something that she has to move from that.
Is there ice in denial, though?
It is. There's a stream. It's very. I'm trying to look at all the pictures.
Right. I have a feeling that the icy stuff and his location might come a little bit later, but I mean, there could be all kinds of things in denial.
Shock would make the most sense, maybe.
Yeah, and doesn't shock come? Shock comes after.
Shock, I thought. Well.
Yes, I think.
Where is a very easy outline of the level, of the domains?
I think it should be stages of PTSD we have. Is there a testing? I'm sorry, I'm looking at this right now.
Yeah. I seem to recall that the stages of PSD I think we kind of wanted it to get laid out because it is levels. I kind of felt like this was a little bit difficult to, because even I'm coming back to this, I'm reading chapters, stages of PTSD. It might want to be like chapters, levels. I don't know. We might want to talk about how to label this or display it so it's clearer that this is the sort of layout of the levels.
Right. You made the one timeline, but I don't know if there's like a set, stage list.
The current stage list that we have of stages of PTSD.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good list. I guess my only point is, it doesn't say to me. Anyway, I think it doesn't say to me levels. It says chapters. So it's looking good though. So where would this go? It would go. You're right. It might actually go into shock, which would be quite early in the game. But encountering the Oracle early in the game, he could give us the mysterious goal that we don't quite yet understand, and then we could go on from there. But Taylor has just put into the chat that the caterpillar is currently contained in the stage called depression, but it's important to keep in mind that the reason that Joey put that into depression was the color scheme. It wasn't necessarily about the narrative content. Depression's happening about halfway through the game. I'd say that that's a very late stage for the Oracle to appear and sort of give us the what for of what we're doing.
You've come this far, Alice, but let me just pop up and give you a bit of help when you're nearly done.
Then again, it could be something where we meet the caterpillar earlier in the game. We get some bit of information from him, and then we meet him again later in the game. And when we meet him later, he's frozen in depression. So that's not to say we couldn't use him twice. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
I was going to say, you said that he was always like the neutral arbiter of wisdom. Was he always like that? Maybe in this early game, he wasn't, and that's why he was punished by being frozen. So going forwards into the future, he became neutral.
So, as I said, he was that way in the books as well.
All right.
So having him flip and not be that way in this game really goes against his character type.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd prefer we just keep that clean. Like, he's just the mysterious oracle, and that his character sort of remain that way.
Fair enough.
All right. Okay, so why don't we put a pin in this idea that maybe he needs to appear during either denial or, yeah, I think actually it would make sense to have him appear in denial in a scene, he's sort of up to his old tricks of oblique description of the problem that Alice is going to run into. And then later on in the game, we could encounter him in depression. And as Insomniac Let's Player says, this is where his arc gets resolved. And I think that probably makes a lot of sense. Wendy says maybe we see him frozen during shock. I think that's an interesting idea, to see him frozen. But if we want to have him, I think, be as a part of the reveal that denial is denial, maybe we would have that happen in denial. So we meet him in denial, but then towards the end of denial, he and the whole stage get kind of turned on its head and frozen.
That'd be more fun to see, just in terms of scenes. And, yeah.
And that's what Octo Chicken just said. So there you go. Yep. Okay. Sounds like there's a couple of little pieces here we should record and go from there. Okay. Unless there's any other comments on this, we can move on to point 2. No. All right, so point 2.
What?
You sure, Martin?
Pretty sure.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Would you want to come back in 10 seconds late and let me know that it's all okay? I'll wait 10 seconds.
Don't blame me. Blame internet lag.
All right, internet lag. All right, going on to point 2, House of Mirrors acts as the central hub of Wonderland, allowing Alice to travel from place to place. Now, didn't we come up with something like a central hub, but somehow it wasn't a House of Mirrors? Am I...
I think it was a bookcase, or it was a library, if I'm not mistaken. I would have to double check.
You had this one image where she was like pulling a lever, and then like there was like a wheel that like chose the worlds that you would go to. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's an image that Joey did of a sort of world selection. But I think we've also talked about having a central plaza, a central area, and there was like a toy shop there, and there was a candy shop there, and there was a bunch of other... Remember that?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Insomniac says that's very Mario 64-ish to have a House of Mirrors, and he's correct, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about having a sort of a main hub, and sort of like you could travel around the hub, and it was like its own little level, but as you gained abilities, you gained access to different areas within the hub.
Yeah. I remember us talking about that. I'm trying to see where we put that on the wiki.
Well, I think the House of Mirrors as a hub has sort of been used quite a lot. I mean, in Wonderland, I know that there is a Wonderland sort of rail system. We could consider using the rail system as a sort of, hub, a train station, but that's very Harry Potter-ish. Are there any other ideas on what would make a good central hub in Wonderland?
I swear we talked about a library, but I could just be completely off base.
I kind of recall something like that, but it's kind of slipped my mind. I've been out in the sun way too much recently. Well, we could have our artists work on this. This
Yeah.
would be an interesting place to define, and we could give them a list of potential options. So one could be a library. I like that as a hub concept. One could be a train station. We could even ask them to do something that's an amalgam of a train station plus a library, which would probably look pretty cool.
Oh, that would.
And then we've also mentioned the House of Mirrors, and then I think Octo Chicken is here saying that the astrolabe type of hub, which I know Joey did a version of that. That could be quite interesting. Any other ideas that we would want to?
Well, just thinking about all this, if we want to have it, we don't have to limit ourselves to one general hub. If she's in the asylum, it could be different areas in the hub that represent this is the library, this is the train station, this is X, Y, and Z. We could have the asylum as the hub, as in where she's going to, and maybe have different areas representing that.
I'm not quite sure I follow that.
Why would you want more than one hub?
No, what I mean is have the different hub areas be stylized to look different.
So it changes?
As you move along, if we see like, hey, we really like how a library looks, but hey, this area of the train station looks good, why not both?
I'm still confused.
Okay. But that's fine. It's an idea, don't worry.
Okay.
I'm just here to confuse people.
All right, that goal has been accomplished.
My job here is done.
Good. Are there any other ideas we want to put down, including yours? Maybe I just don't understand it, but because it would be good to give the artists a list of some things to work on related to the hub, because it's the hub. It's going to be very central to the game, and so.
I like what Wendy said is the hub can change as we progress. Just seeing the hub dynamically, either get lighter, darker, something, decay, grow.
So it's just like one hub, but as you progress through the game, kind of like the theme of it changes a bit. Still the same place, but just visually it changes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it changes it doesn't have to be dramatic, but as things get unlocked, the hub itself.
Well, there are two ideas that are appearing on screen here that are kind of sort of linked up. So Luca is saying maybe a different hub for each stage of grief, and Wendy is saying maybe the hub can change as we progress. So I think what might make sense is that there's a hub. For right now, let's just call it a train station, just to make it really simple. So we've got a train station. When we first see the train station, it is in form of that stage, which would be denial. And so there's a sort of a denial train station, and the central architecture of it is never going to change terribly dramatically, but the lighting, the particle effects, the characters, or the behavior of the characters, as we move into anger, say for instance, what if the train station is now filled with a bunch of angry passengers, and when we get to bargaining, there's a bunch of beggars, and when we're in depression, everyone's walking around crying. So I mean, we could do things like that where the hub reflects the general mood in any given moment, but that the architecture of it, it's a train station. It's going to stay a train station, but a lot of the other elements, because you can imagine, like in a film, if a director were to shoot inside of a train station, they could light it and set it up to be a very frenetic, very dangerous, very angry feeling, or they could switch up the music, they could turn down the lights, they could increase the fog, and suddenly it becomes a very desolate, depressing, sad place, right? So maybe something along those lines.
That one I really like.
I think that's a really good idea, American Truth. And having it as like you have the characters, as you said, that can change, adapt. I think. What does everyone else say?
They're liking it.
And here, Steffi is saying, what about a brain with different synapses connecting? Well, if we think about a train station and a brain station, right? I mean, there's a lot of things about brains and trains that are similar, the paths and the ways that messages are carried. So, I think having an overarching concept of a train station representing her brain, there's plenty of places where we can hint at the metaphor and reinforce that. And again, so now we're having the emotional manifestation of whatever stage we happen to be at reflected in the mood of the train station. And then at times there could be other physical things that reflect whatever happens to be going on in her brain in terms of information moving around or puzzles being solved and things like that. But that's reflected in there being gates open and trains on tracks that were, not there before, things along those lines. The brain station or the Nintendo butt jack. There you go. Yeah, Seafoam says have the mock turtle as the conductor. That is a great suggestion. So why don't we pencil in that, the artists work on a train station, they work on a library. Again, maybe it's kind of a smashed together bit of train station plus library. That would be really beautiful.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at, was having it where we don't have to limit ourselves to just one locale.
Well, the other thing, going back to Steffi's comment, is that if the train station is a representation of her brain, then the brain would be made up. The train station would be made up of information. So what if you have a train station made out of books, right? The entire architecture, instead of using bricks, the whole place is made of books.
A book train station. That'd be a first to see.
I like it. It's different too. It's not something.
Yeah. So we'll get the artists working on that. I think that could actually be really cool. The floors, the ceiling, everything's made of tiles of books, and the whole place kind of has this weird air, a mix of library quiet but train station hustle and bustle. Could be really, really interesting.
People in the chat are making reference to, in the Harry Potter movies, the one train station scene in the final one where it's just stark white and you just hear the sounds and everything in the back.
Right.
There's a lot you can do with it, especially, again, we're set in London. We have that concept, so there's some work. But
well, we'll talk to, I think Omri might be good to tackle that one. And if he's listening to this after the fact, then Omri, jump on that train station.
Octogrid always said the Matrix. I was thinking the same thing, that their trains are representative quite a bit in different media as kind of a moving point.
Taylor also said just have a giant book as the roof.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot we can do with this. Books flying around instead of pigeons, and
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're onto something there. So that kind of knocks point 2 on the head. So maybe not a house of mirrors, but a train station, and that's how she travels. Yeah. The brain station.
The brain station.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, comments on this topic?
I'm seeing that some people, one thing that also is good with the train station is with books. We could put people's messages. We have a lot of ability to fill it in with details.
That would be really cool. Yeah. Imagine, like, that now we have a space we could, like, literally everybody who's joined us on Patreon could have a book or a page in a book somewhere in the station.
Run around, find your own book. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool. Taylor's mentioned, or Lucas mentioning original Lewis Carroll stuff as an Easter egg in there. Yeah, there's all kinds of things we could do that.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so moving on to point 3, a Hatter-inspired funhouse area. I think this would probably make a lot of sense in the circus level, and I kind of imagine that we're going to see a lot of the Wonderland characters, including Hatter, partaking in the circus area, even though it may be that there's sort of faux representations of those characters. It may not be the real Hatter, but maybe somebody else in sort of a Hatter disguise. But you could imagine that in that zone, there is a Hatter funhouse in the circus area.
Would the Hatter and the Tweedles be like chums at this stage, or
No, that's why I'm saying that we would have somebody perhaps in a costume. It doesn't have to be the actual Hatter, because remember, Alice has been kidnapped into the circus, and any representations of other Wonderland characters in the circus may all be fake. They all may be people in costumes.
Yeah.
cosplayers.
Cosplayers.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, on to point 4. This is a tortured soul character reminiscent of the Big Daddies from BioShock. Something innocent turned into a monster. Does anybody have any other thoughts or notes on this point?
It's very vague.
It's very vague, and from what I'm seeing, it's vague. And I don't know if they're trying to get at the fact of having like an iconic character that, you know, is the Mr. Bubbles that goes around and lays into things, but the whole concept of, you know, an imposing character that you're never really going to get through, kind of like a Mr. X as well. So
I see.
But that's what I take from it.
Okay. I think this kind of point would be better made if it actually led to a word or a character from the books or from the games. Because, I mean, we certainly have plenty of tortured soul characters and plenty of names in the books that we've perhaps not seen yet realized in the games. But yeah, I mean, something innocent turned into a monster. That's pretty much our whole game.
Yeah, and as Octogreg, which I still love saying, you know, Shadow Alice would kind of be that tortured soul, truthfully.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Moving on. Number 5, Chaos Mode changes Wonderland, as in the opening hidden areas, making things accessible that weren't in normal mode. Yeah.
I think that's just general gameplay, isn't it? You know, powers let you get places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Not much else to say on that point. I think we have. Do we have Chaos Mode described as a game mechanic yet in the wiki?
Really, we've always had kind of
I think.
But we do have. I know we had the hysteria, and rage. I'm looking at the rest of.
Is that under power-ups? No. Okay. Well, I think this kind of comment, I mean, this just needs to go into the description on the wiki for whatever that is, for whatever chaos mode turns into. But I think we've discussed this on multiple occasions, that either some power dress or other item that you pick up would allow you to travel back, get to a hidden or inaccessible area. So that's fine. No worries. Anything that we need to think about on that, or any of the comments going on? No. Okay. So point.
Seems quiet.
All right. Thank you, Mr. 5-second delay. All right. So point 6: rage or hysteria given based on performance, as in rage good, hysteria bad. So rage charges as you fight. Hysteria builds as damage is taken. Rage builds as damage is given. Right. So rage mode: take no damage from minor enemies, deal heavy damage, lasts a limited amount of time, must collect potion or shards to activate. Rage is an early power up that charges you as you progress. I like this description. I mean, this is, I think, fairly standard. Do we have any other thoughts or bits of input on this?
I remember people were saying from our last stress talks that maybe just having one power, like one set power up, would be good instead of having like chaos, rage, hysteria, like all in one, since those are already in the other games.
Yeah, from what we kind of went over was the mode of the Inferno, which was the collectible, and then the Rage, or one was collectible, it could be used whenever you wanted, the other was kind of the charge base, where it was an item that, you know, hey, I want to turn on the Rage and just go wild at at this location, as you said,
Correct.
making sure that people, you know, felt like they had the power to just unleash.
Yeah, I think that's right. Has that made it into the wiki semi-final format or description?
Took notes, but you never said exactly what we were gonna do, so I don't think we wrote it down yet.
We have each of these dresses have an alternative chaos or rage mode that the player is able to trigger. So,
Right.
so
It
we
feels
have
like we need to kind of put a pin in that. I know that the question of like the dresses and how those modes activate, I mean, that's a very big Pandora's box that I don't know that we've actually completely settled, right?
Mm-hmm.
hmm
I even have an email from Omri in my sitting in my inbox from when I was out at Pirate Jam, in which he describes his idea for an alternate way in which the dresses could somehow you wear a dress, but you change out the skull in order to get access to various powers. I mean, it's you know, I still think it could lead to confusion. But in any case, the point here is we haven't figured this out. We haven't
Yeah.
settled this yet.
Right.
we've had so many talks about the dresses, the power ups. I know we've gone round and round on that. So
Right. I thought somehow at the end of the last conversation, though, we decided we were going to go with the narrative drives the distribution of the dresses. In other words, you have a dress, it's given to you in a certain area because the story dictates that, and then as the game progresses, you get different and new dresses, but you're not able to really drag the old dresses or the wrong dresses into any area. Unless perhaps at the end of the game you want to play back through and then we give you that option. Isn't that where we left it?
we had
I
the
think
dress
so.
poll, which was option 1, dresses locked to the domain. Option 2, dresses always available after unlocking. And option 3, other, I'll leave a comment
And confuse
to
us
further
more.
confuse the situation. And it is at 47 for dresses locked to domain, 50 at dresses always available, and 3 for option 3, confusing everything.
It's always
Right.
half and half, pretty much.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
half
those-
and half. I'm gonna
Swung
quickly.
back the other way a little.
I'm gonna take a quick look and see if anyone says anything major on option 3.
Well, I don't think we want to get bogged down in that
Yeah,
right
I was gonna
now.
say let's not get bogged
we'll
down in
talk
dresses.
about that
We've
when we
already
get back to dresses or something.
Yeah. So back to the point that's made here in point 6 of the gameplay suggestions. I don't think that this point is saying anything controversial. It's certainly not saying anything that I would sort of be against. I like the idea of charging up something, call it rage or call it chaos or call it, I mean, we need to put a label on it, but you know, charging something up that you can unleash.
Mhm.
And then also that in whatever the opposite, call it hysteria mode is, you know, you end up taking less damage. I mean, this is all fine. So I think what we need to do though is some effort needs to go into just writing down the basics of, you know, dresses are locked to a domain, and these power-ups, one is one that you collect and one is one that you charge up, and then sort of just pencil some of that stuff in. That'll help to kind of make it more real.
All right.
Okay.
Oh.
Octo Chicken says, I'd love to see the Inferno power-up mode in the game. Whatever you're wearing at the time goes up in flames to Inferno mode when you want to power up, with perhaps the final fight going into Harvest mode rather than cycling through a different series of power-ups. I'd like to keep Rage and Hysteria as the iconic modes for their respective games, perhaps. I'm fine with this. You know, I don't know about the or something part. I'm
Or something.
I'm really against or something. But the rest of what's said here, I'm really for, and it looks like there's a lot of people who are really for this. So I don't feel like there's as much controversy around this topic as we think there is. So why don't we put into some form what's been said here by Octo Greg in the wiki, and then we'll come back to it.
Very important.
Yeah,
Screenshot.
We'll get Omri to do the or something dress.
Hmm. It'll be cobbled together of something in Greg's junk.
There you go. Okay, but yeah, let's just make a decision here, whether it's the right decision or it's the right decision later or not. We don't really know, but it is, I think, important for us to just say, look, we're pretty divided on this topic, but in order to move forward, we need to decide one thing or one way or another. And if at some point we get way down the road and we realize, oh, this is a really bad idea for whatever reason, well, then we'll just have to tear up all the things that are connected to that and start over. But until we've at least tried to nail this down, it's going to be very hard to move forward. So, yeah.
I think so.
On to the next one then.
Okay, point 7. Alice builds rages when the player has her do meaningless tasks or does a task incorrectly. Only gets angry once to prevent spamming. I really like the idea of Alice being self-aware or aware of the player and the player's input actions. We've talked about this before, that if you were to try to push Alice into a situation that would be certain death, she could refuse.
That's actually point 8, actually, so that's the next one down.
Okay, so point 8 says
saying,
Alice ignores some of players' commands. With older Alice as the narrator, Alice could claim that's not what happened, or you're remembering wrong when the player tries to do something wrong, as in jumping off a ledge, etc. Yeah, I personally like this a lot because I think it gives the player, it gives the character in the game, it gives Alice kind of agency that I think a lot of times I like to see video game characters have more of.
Mm-hmm. So going back to 7, now that we again jump in a bit, what I think works with that is we don't want to pick, from a game player perspective, you don't want them to sit and wait. You want them to be active, and I see this as, how do you build a rage meter? I look at like Devil May Cry, things like that, where you build up a combo, you just constantly are attacking or something of that nature, instead of being passive. But that's how I look at how you would build rage.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm just looking to see if anyone else has anything.
Okay, this is talking about building rage when the player does something meaningless. Are you suggesting that rage would build if the player just sits still?
No, what I'm saying is not to do that. When they're doing meaningless, to me, that means doing nothing. Is just walking around. I mean, what would be a better way to build rage? What would be something?
Oh, I see. Yeah, because I personally like the idea that we can walk around the beauty of Wonderland, or even the destroyed beauty of Wonderland, and just sort of take in the scenery without that somehow being, we're punished for that. So I think when I read the idea of doing meaningless tasks, or does a task, it would be like throwing yourself off of a cliff unnecessarily, or perhaps going around bashing on a wall, on walls and rocks unnecessarily. With your weapon. So it could be, but at the same time, you wouldn't want it to be where the player can just, as it says in the comment here, it's not spamming this thing happening all the time.
Yeah. Of Bar of Light says, in Devil May Cry, when you're attacked or get hurt, your devil trigger builds up, and that's kind of where I was going with as well.
Yeah.
Is, have it where it's built on combat. Have it where, you can walk around Wonderland, enjoy it all you want, but when you're in knee-deep and slashing people up, that's when it should build.
Right. Well, I think I get the point here. That point 7, Alice builds rage when player has to do meaningless tasks. How do we define meaningless tasks? That is difficult to do, since we're not like a crafting simulator. We're not a city building, it's not like you can be building roads to places that don't need roads. So it's going to be very hard to measure that concept. So maybe point 7, until somebody gives that a better kind of definition, we just ignore that for now. But point 8, the idea that Alice ignores some players' commands, I think we should build a wiki page around that and call it something like, player character agency, or Alice, player character agency, and just start to list out a couple of places, and it could just be just a giant collection of Easter eggs. Like, if you try to jump into the fire here, she refuses. If you try to jump off a cliff there, she turns around and says, don't do that. If you try to attack a character who, like, say, Caterpillar shouldn't be attacked. She turns around and says, "That's not how this goes," that kind of thing.
Yeah, I do like point 8, but I think there has to be a balance. It can't just constantly be happening.
Correct.
But, it also... Yeah,
well, that's what I'm saying.
be
It might end
tricky
up
to
being
do.
just a list of essentially what are Easter eggs, right? It would be very specific points throughout the game where we can trigger this, but you kind of have to be in the right place at the right time for it to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And pages are being created.
All right. Any other comments or points to be made on either 7 or 8? Waiting for Martin to chime in 5 seconds from now.
No, I'm going to chime
Wow.
in now.
Great.
Getting sassy there.
So, point 9, let players find weapons rather than handing them to them. I'm not a big fan of just handing weapons over. I'd like weapons to arrive with fanfare, or at least in some sort of a geographic setting that kind of sells an idea of why they are there. So, for instance, in Madness Returns, you picked up the Vorpal Blade from the corpse of the Jabberwock, or you got the pepper grinder from the Duchess. That sort of weapon presentation is, I believe, the kind that we want. So I don't know. I'm not sure why point 9 was made. Did we just throw a rocket launcher on the ground somewhere in the previous games?
I don't remember, so...
Kind of feels like every time you pick up a game in the pick up a weapon in the Alice games, you got a line of dialogue.
Yeah, like the classic one is a croquet, like a billy
Yeah.
club.
Okay. Yeah, so get out of here, point 9.
Get out of here. Be away.
Everybody agrees with that.
Yeah, there has to be some fanfare, doesn't there?
Yes. Okay. So Seafoam says, I had an idea that we use slingshot shaped like Mercury symbol as a weapon.
Oh yeah, Luca also made a 3D render of that.
And that's a
Awesome.
13 actually. So.
Well, there you go. Okay. Well, you guys, I don't know, present that somewhere, and we'll see. Moving on to point 10. Giant Alice makes a reappearance. Eat the cake again to stomp on the enemies. Yeah, I think that I would like to see in the new game that we have a range of small and giant be sort of better presented, because in the previous games they were kind of gimmicky. I mean, I think that the shrink thing in Madness Returns was okay because it was instantaneous and it was quite useful. As far as getting big goes, I think that's a challenge to overcome. How we give the player access to that in more places throughout the game, and how we make it more interesting and fun.
Probably not overdoing it though, because like have more of it, yeah. But like having that one instance in Madness Returns was really nice. But yeah, I do want more.
Yeah, the big thing is again it relates to gameplay and also
story.
Story. But the thing with Alice in Wonderland, it's all about changing perspective, changing size as well. So
Yeah. Okay.
And we have render. So I mean, and that gets down to though, I guess when we actually get the engine and figure out kind of where the technology lies too, because I mean, it really gets down to let's suddenly make Alice as a head rolling around. That was so much fun.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those things where, from a creative perspective, we all might sit around and say, hey, one of the central concepts that the culture has taken away from the Alice books is the idea of shrinking and growing, and the perspective and the change in interface with the world that brings. But both of those concepts, as they pertain to video games, are actually really difficult, because that sort of radical perspective shift, it has all kinds of impacts over level design and texture sizes and interfaces, and so it's not easy to implement that in a seamless, interesting, and sort of production feasible way. So it may just be that we go back to what we did in Madness Returns, which is you have the occasional sandbox in which you can do it, but we somehow make the occasional sandbox, there's a few more of them, and they're a little more gratifying.
I think that would be a good opportunity there.
Okay. Okay. As far as this point goes, I mean, that could be a page. It could be something where we talk about some of these very wonderlandy type of experiences. This is, I think, in the games industry, they're called in porn. They're called money shots. What are they called in the games industry? They're called not unique selling points. There's another phrase for this, but
sizzle, not sizzle reel.
I can't remember. But anyway, this would be a page that contains some of those key moments that really sell the concept. I forget what the little jargon. It's a stupid jargon anyway, so forget about it. But anyway, make that page, and then we fill that up with some of the wish list things. Growing is one of those. Shrinking, and doing these in a meaningful way, right, is one of those. Having some scene where her head is off with her head, and yet it's done in a way that's not the dumb head rolling through the puzzles type of stuff to make it interesting.
Set piece. That's
Set
a phrase.
Pieces. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. That sounds right. Okay. Okay, moving on to point 11. This is a very interesting one. If Alice stares at an enemy too long, their heads will explode. So it suggests that this enemy has multiple heads, and that we stare at them. I guess someone's going to have to interpret this multiple-headed enemy that you at. All right. Sounds like we don't know what's going on here.
Stare.
I think it should be stares at an enemy. I think it's best to type.
And maybe that just their head, one singular head.
Yeah, and once their heads should probably be apostrophe. So let me see if I can.
Right. Well, we talked about, we did talk about the whole squishing your head thing. I really weapon, even though I've now seen that, what was it, Call of Duty or Medal of Honor, some game kind of put it in as a cutesy thing, but I don't think that we can't do this because the first time I saw this was 20 years ago on Kids in the Hall, and there was a whole series of skits where they would be out on the
head.
Squishing your head, pinching your head. So I would really, really like it if one of our weapons pages showed Alice, peering through her fingers and squishing the heads of her enemies. Because again, this is going to be in that section where, she's childish. She's using toys as weapons. Maybe at some point she doesn't even have the ability to use the toys as weapons, and so the only thing she's got is pure imagination of I'm squishing your head. Or if she stares and their heads will explode.
What?
Okay. So it looks like point 12 is actually squishing distance with the fingers. Great. Let's have that, please. Point 13. So it says here, have elements in the game. I'm assuming we're talking as in alchemical or chemical elements. Mercury as a poison element, slingshot with elemental marbles, emotions as elements. Okay. So this point, I feel like, is just yes. We're definitely going to have elements in the game because we've had elements in all of the games. They're actually quite central to this particular game world. I think the points being made here, does anybody want to expand on these or? Hello? No. Everyone's still alive?
No.
Okay.
We all got our heads squished. Yep.
Got them squished and just reading the chat. Seeing
Okay.
if anyone wanted to say anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing some feedback here. maybe some Truth Decay doesn't like the squishing heads motif seems infantile. This is true. It does. I won't say that this is definitely gonna be in the final product, but I would like to just see it. I'd like to just try it in the game, and then we'll see, is it infantile and silly or not. Lots of awkward silence.
Lots of awkward silence.
What's going on here? Okay. So back to point 13, elements in the game. Yes, we're going to do an element. We've never really thought about the elements as being poison, not poison. They're generally meant to be representative of a particular thing, a character, an emotion, a realm, or a stage of Alice's transformation. But we could kind of look at them as beyond that. We'll see. As far as a slingshot with element marbles, could be something. I think we have talked about the collection of elements and combination of elements to perhaps modify weapons or even modify the ammunition that the weapons fire. Is that on the wiki yet?
Yeah, that's underneath, actually. Building
Okay.
blocks used for altering, upgrading weapons.
Right.
16.
And then we've also got the point here of emotions as elements. And certainly in what's been described so far, there is a link between elements and emotions and elements.
Emotions.
Yes, that was terrible. And so that's
You are welcome.
that is in spreadsheets. That's in our wiki so far. So no real contention on this point. Anybody have anything else they want to add on point 13?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
I know this is we're just putting like suggestions and ideas down. But I do think we still also have to be very mindful about just like power creep, just having too many mechanics in the game.
Correct.
Yes.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So we are coming up on the end of the hour, and I know there have been some requests to make these sessions longer, but I do have a pregnant wife, and she does have a hospital appointment to go to very soon, and I have to take her to that. So I'm thinking maybe what we'll do is everyone can just kind of scroll back through the previous 13 points, because 13 is a good lucky number to end on. Is there anything that anyone wants to add in closing, as Font Lord just did, with regards to power creep?
Having too much, it probably would be a little unnecessary, I think, also. So I agree with Martin. If it's just a little...
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, it's with anything, the two things I think of is one, power creep, and two, what engine, when it comes down to actually implementing some of the bigger, grandiose, sizzle, money shot, whatever you want to call them, effects.
What engine you mean, as in the engine technology?
Yeah, what technology, that's what I mean, yeah. And that's far out. I mean, that's not something to be worried about this second, but it's just...
That is very, very far out. Someone did email me or Twitter me or something, said that we ought to... Oh, it was Jennifer. Jennifer wrote and said, hey, you ought to bother Tim, what's his name, of
Schaefer?
Epic. That's not the right Tim. Tim, damn it, now I've forgotten his name. Anyway, the guy, the CEO of Epic Games, because apparently they have some sort of mega Epic fund for throwing at games. And the suggestion was go and get your Alice funding from Epic, because we did use the Unreal Engine on the last Alice game.
Tim Sweeney.
So, Tim Sweeney, there you go. So I was going to say that maybe one of the things we Patreon is a sort of petition. So we petition Epic to throw money at a new Alice game. And perhaps if we could get 50,000 signatures on a, hey, Epic, give Alice money to be a thing, we could budge those guys towards that direction.
I'm going to have to add one thing about that, though, is the issue with the Epic concept is the Epic launcher. And what that usually means is it has to only be using the Epic launcher. So that would cause an issue if EA wants to launch it on Origin.
That is a very good point, but I do think in this, get a carve out from Epic to allow the thing also to be on Origin.
That would be one thing to go over. But yeah, that's one of the big issues that happened is where games have ended up as Epic exclusive.
Yeah.
And people have
Yeah.
been getting their pennies in a twist over that.
Yeah, well, the other thing is just I've seen plenty of negativity around that Epic Store and the launcher and whatnot in general. So maybe that's not the best place for us to go. Anyway, that is not a topic for today.
Yeah, that's not. I just had to
Yeah.
point that out. So
the question though was, what engine are we going to use? You asked me the Epic engine Unreal, but say for instance we did get our money from Amazon, then it's very likely that we would be using the modified Crytek engine, otherwise known as Lumberyard. So it all really depends on where the money comes from. I think two most likely sources right now, one we could go with Epic, and the other one I can't say just yet. But anyway, we'll see. So it's a bit early for all that. Okay, is there any other comment that needs to be made as we are now coming up at the end of the hour? No. Alrighty. Well, let's sign. Thanks, Martin, for that 5-second delay. I knew that was coming. Thank you. And you want to do one more of those?
Maybe.
Maybe.
you're in the same country. How are you getting such a long delay?
I don't know.
All right. So here's the thing. I'm going to wrap up now. Our insane children who joined us via Discord. Those are our supporters also over on Patreon, and a big thank you to them for their support and for joining us today. If you are listening to this after the fact over on YouTube, then please do consider becoming a patron. All the links to that are in the description below, along with the links to the Asylum Wiki, where you can find and follow along with all the details of the things we were discussing today. We do these, I said doo-doo, haha. We do these live stream crowd design sessions. We try to do them once per week. And so we shall be back again next week to continue down the list of gameplay suggestions. We ended today at number 13. We still, there's 42.
Oh.
42 suggestions to get through.
We always seem to end on 13. I swear, that's the good number for us, is usually about 10, 13.
That's my lucky number, so that makes sense. So there you go. So as Truth Decay says, this was sexy. Stay cool, team. Go team. Manic AF. Yes, Truth Decay. Thank you. Jib it up. All right, guys.
Jib it up.
That was a good one, and I look forward to your comments and notes in the comments below, and I will chat with you insane children some more later on. I am now off to see my pregnant wife to the hospital.
Okay.
Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
See you all later.
Take care, everyone.